Hello, my dear friends. The air is sharp and smells of wood smoke and the promise of a deep, biting cold. You pull your shawl tighter, the rough wool a familiar weight against your shoulders as you look out from a small, leaded glass window at the dark, dense forest that seems to press in on all sides of your small settlement. This is your world now, a tiny island of order in a vast sea of what your leaders call the untamed, godless wilderness. It's a life of immense faith and crushing labor, and if you were a woman living here in 17th century New England, let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive to see your 40th birthday. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Imagine yourself in that small, timber-framed house. The only light comes from the flickering fire, casting long, dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls. The only sound is the wind howling outside and the soft crackle of the logs. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The man standing beside you is not your soulmate. He's your husband, but the word meant something profoundly different then. You did not choose him for love, or attraction, or even for companionship in the way we might think of it. You consented to this union, yes, but your choice was guided by a web of consideration spun by your family, your community, and your church. Is he a man of property? Is his faith sound? Does his standing in the community promise stability for the children you are expected to produce without fail? These were the questions that mattered. The public image, the illusion you are both now tasked with upholding, is that of a holy covenant. You are a good wife, a helpmeet, a cornerstone of a new, godly society. In the Sunday sermons, your role is elevated to one of quiet, sacred importance. You are the neck that turns the head, the gentle hand that raises pious children and transforms a simple house into a fortress of Christian order. You are seen as the living embodiment of submission, not in a demeaning way, but as a reflection of the Church's submission to Christ. This is the glamorous illusion. You are a vital, respected partner in the great and holy enterprise of building a city upon a hill. But now let's pull back the curtain on that beautiful, comforting idea. Let's talk about what actually happened when you said "I do." The moment those words were spoken, your legal identity vanished. It wasn't diminished, it was entirely extinguished, absorbed into your husband's like a drop of ink into a black cloth. The legal term for this was femme covet, meaning a covered woman. Covered, as in, hidden from the law. You are no longer a person in the eyes of the court. You cannot own property, not even the dress on your back or the pewter spoon you stir the morning's porridge with. If you brought a degree to this marriage, land or money from your father, it immediately became your husband's to manage, sell, or squander as he saw fit. You cannot sign a contract. You cannot sue someone who has wronged you. You cannot write a will to leave your own possessions to your children, because you have no possessions. Your husband, now your master, is legally responsible for all of your actions, and that includes your discipline. He has the right, and indeed the duty, to correct you, just as he would a disobedient child or a stubborn farm animal. The shocking reality isn't just a lack of rights. It's a complete erasure of self. Imagine your entire existence, your name, your wealth, your legal voice being bundled up, handed over, and locked in a box to which only your husband holds the key. The wedding ring on your finger is less a symbol of eternal love and more like a tag on a piece of luggage, indicating ownership. And this wasn't some dirty little secret. This was the foundation of law and social order, spoken of plainly and without shame. So why? Why would a society built on such lofty ideals of creating a new, more perfect world enforce such a complete and total subjugation of half its population? The answer lies in their deepest, most cherished belief, the idea of the covenant. The Puritans believed they had a special agreement with God. In exchange for their piety and rigid adherence to his laws, he would bless their colony with prosperity and protect it from the vast, terrifying wilderness, both the literal one outside their doors and the spiritual one within their own hearts. This covenant depended on absolute order. Every single thing had its proper place in a divine hierarchy. God above all, then the magistrates, then the ministers, then the husbands, and then you. Your submission was not a personal matter between you and your husband. It was a public testament to the entire community's commitment to God's plan. A defiant wife, a disorderly household, was seen as a crack in this sacred covenant. It was a weakness that could invite God's wrath upon everyone. Your personal freedom, your identity, was a small, necessary sacrifice for the survival and divine favor of the entire colony. It was your holy duty to become invisible, to be the silent, sturdy beam that holds up the house, never seen, but whose absence would mean total collapse. Your new life, this covenant of orderly submission, has now begun. The wedding celebration, a modest affair with little of the feasting or dancing of the old country, is over. You have moved into his house, which is now your house, though you will never own a single peg within it. And as you stand in the center of the main room, the shadows thrown by the firelight dancing around you, you realize your entire existence for the rest of your life will be tethered to one central, all-consuming feature of this home. It is the source of all warmth, all food, all light, and as you will soon learn, a constant, silent threat to your very breath. You stare into the massive fireplace that dominates the main room. It is not a charming architectural feature, it is the engine of your life. More than 6 feet wide and 4 feet tall, it's a cavern of brick and stone, black with the soot of constant use. This is the hearth, and in the romanticized story of your life, it is the sacred center of your domestic world. It is the sun around which your family orbits. In the morning, its flames are the first thing you see, chasing away the deep, primal fear of the dark. Its warmth is the only thing that stands between your children and the brutal New England winter, a physical manifestation of God's grace warding off the freezing wilderness. It is your stove, your oven, your water heater, and your lamp. The iron kettle hanging from the trammel, the long-handled spider skillet, the bake kettle nestled in the coals. These are the tools of your trade, the instruments with which you conduct the symphony of survival. The illusion is one of profound, comforting domesticity. Here you transform raw nature into civilization, venison into savory stew, corn into bread, icy water into warm broth. The hearth is the symbol of your role as a good wife, a place of alchemy where your labor makes life not only possible, but orderly and good. Now, take a deep breath. Not a metaphorical one, a real one. Feel the air, fill your lungs, because the most shocking reality of this hearth-centered life is that you can almost never, ever take a clean breath. The chimney technology of the era is, to put it mildly, dreadful. The flue is too wide, the firebox too shallow, and the principles of a proper draft are a mystery for a future century to solve. The result is that your home's bastion of order is perpetually filled with a thick, choking haze of wood smoke. It's not the gentle, pleasant aroma you might associate with a campfire. It is a constant, acrid, eye-watering assault. In the winter, when every crack and window is sealed tight against the cold, the smoke simply has nowhere to go. It billows out into the room, clinging to every surface, forming a visible, grey-brown cloud that hovers in the air. Your eyes sting and water, not just occasionally, but all day, every day. You develop a permanent, hacking cough, what your neighbors will call a winter sickness, but it lingers well into the summer. Everything you own is imbued with the smell and feel of soot. Run your hand along the wooden mantelpiece, and your fingers come away black. The linen in your chest, carefully folded, smells of old fires. The very food you cook, the bread you pull from the bake kettle, has a gritty, smoky taste that you no longer even notice. It's the taste of home. The shocking, gross-out fact is what this is doing to your insides. The fine black particles you are constantly inhaling are coating the delicate tissues of your lungs, building up a layer of creosote year after year. That phlegm you cough up into the fire in the morning isn't just from a chill. It's your body trying and failing to purge itself of the very air you breathe. And beyond the slow poison of the smoke, there is the immediate danger. A sudden downdraft can send a shower of glowing embers onto the wooden floor, or worse, onto the flax fibers of your spinning wheel. Your heavy wool and linen skirts could easily brush against a log and ignite. Every moment you spend by the fire, which is nearly every waking moment, is a dance with the risk of a catastrophic, deadly fire that could consume your home, your family, and you in minutes. So why would you live this way? Why accept being slowly poisoned and smoked like a piece of ham in your own home? The reason is a mixture of technological limitation and deeply ingrained belief. They simply didn't have the knowledge to build a better fireplace. The tall, straight, wide chimneys were designed based on the idea that smoke simply rises without understanding the complex interplay of air pressure, temperature, and airflow. The sophisticated, angled designs of Count Rumford that would revolutionize the fireplace were still 150 years in the future. Furthermore, there was a profound suspicion of the outside air. The prevailing medical theory of the time was based on miasmas, bad air, fogs, and mists that were believed to carry disease. The cold, damp air of the forest was seen as particularly dangerous, capable of causing agues, fevers, and fluxes. So, you faced a choice: the known, visible devil of smoke inside, or the unknown, invisible demons of disease from outside. You chose the smoke. And layered on top of that was the Puritan world view of endurance. A life of ease was a life of sin. Hardship was a test from God. To complain about the smoke in your eyes or the cough in your chest would be to show a lack of spiritual fortitude. A pious woman accepted her lot, trusting that her reward was not comfort in this life, but salvation in the next. The constant, stinging smoke was just another of life's trials, like the back-breaking work or the fear of Indian raids, to be borne with quiet, prayerful resilience. The fire must be kept going at all times. You feed it logs throughout the day, your arms strong and scarred from the work. It is where you heat the water for washing, for cooking, and for another, more terrifying purpose. Soon, this smoky room will need to be made as warm as possible, the fire built high. The kettle will be constantly boiling, and the room will fill not with the usual quiet hum of domestic life, but with the hushed, urgent voices of other women, all gathered here for the most dangerous passage in a woman's life. The time has come. The pains begin, a deep, rhythmic clenching that signals the start of labor. This is the moment your entire life as a woman in this community has been pointing toward. The glamorous illusion, preached from the pulpit and celebrated in the community, is that childbirth is a sacred, divinely ordained event. Is your primary purpose, your most holy contribution to the covenant. By bringing new children into the world and raising them in the faith, you are literally building the future of the colony. You are fulfilling the biblical injunction to be fruitful and multiply, transforming the wilderness one soul at a time. The birth itself is framed as a purely female affair, a secret ritual from which men are strictly excluded. As your labor progresses, your home transforms. The door is shut to your husband, and the women of the neighborhood begin to arrive, one by one. They are your mother, your sisters, your cousins, and your neighbors, the tight-knit web of female society. They bring with them food, clean linens, and a quiet, confident air. This is the gossip's room, a space temporarily ruled by women, centered around a groaning chair or a birthing stool near that ever-present fire. The image is one of profound solidarity, of women supporting women through a natural, albeit painful, rite of passage. But let's rip away that comforting veil of female camaraderie and peer into the terrifying reality of the birthing room. There is no doctor here. Male physicians, when they existed at all, were considered inappropriate for such a private, female matter. Your care is in the hands of a local midwife. She is a woman of experience, certainly, but her knowledge is a patchwork of folk wisdom, herbal remedies, and deeply ingrained superstition. There is no concept of germ theory. The hands that will reach inside you to guide the baby have not been scrubbed. They have been tending the garden, kneading duff, and emptying the chamber pot just an hour before. The cloths brought to wipe your brow and clean the newborn are clean to the eye, but they harbor invisible colonies of bacteria. The room, sealed tight and heated to a sweltering temperature by that smoky fireplace to ward off dangerous chills, becomes a perfect incubator for infection. The truly shocking, visceral reality is the sheer, brutal danger of it all. You are not just facing pain, you are staring death squarely in the face. Historians estimate that 1 in every 30 births ended in the mother's death. Think about that. If you have 5 children, you face a 1 in 6 chance of dying in childbirth. It is a game of Russian roulette. The slightest complication, a baby in the wrong position, a cord wrapped around the neck, a placenta that won't detach can be a death sentence. The midwife might try to turn a breech baby, her unwashed hands introducing infection deep into your body. If the labor stalls, she might give you an herbal concoction to speed things up, a potion that could cause violent, tearing contractions. If you begin to hemorrhage, they might try to stop the bleeding with cobwebs or poultices, remedies that are useless at best and infectious at worst. And all the while, the gathered women are not just offering quiet support. They are praying, yes, but they are also judging. They are watching, to see if you bear the pain with pious fortitude. A difficult birth might be whispered about later as a sign of some hidden sin, God's judgment made manifest. So why was this deeply dangerous ritual the unshakable norm? Why rely on unsterile hands and folk magic when your life was on the line? The primary reason was theological. According to the Puritan interpretation of the Bible, the pain of childbirth was Eve's curse, a specific punishment from God for her sin in the Garden of Eden. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, the Scripture said. Therefore, to suffer in childbirth was a holy obligation, a reenactment of this biblical punishment. To seek to alleviate the pain too much or to interfere too aggressively with the natural process was seen as an act of hubris, an attempt to defy God's will. The presence of a male doctor was seen as a violation of female modesty and an intrusion into this divinely ordained sphere of female suffering and solidarity. This was women's business, a trial to be endured by women, among women. Furthermore, the community of women in the birthing room served a vital social purpose. It was a powerful ritual that reinforced female bonds. Surviving childbirth together created a shared history of risk and resilience. It was also a training ground, where younger women observed and learned the skills they would one day need. This dangerous, terrifying event was accepted because it was woven into the very fabric of their faith, their social structure, and their understanding of what it meant to be a woman. The potential for death was not a failing of their method, it was a feature of God's plan. As you lie there, sweating in the smoky heat, surrounded by the murmuring voices of your female kin, you are acutely aware that your body is a vessel for this great, holy, and terrifying purpose. The very clothes you wear, even now loosened for the ordeal, are a statement of your piety and your place in this rigid world. They are a uniform of faith, a public declaration of your submission to God's order. And like everything else in your life, their pristine public image hides a much grimmier truth. Every morning, you dress with purpose. The act of putting on your clothes is not a matter of fashion or personal expression. It is a deliberate, public performance of your identity as a God-fearing Puritan woman. The illusion is one of severe, simple, and sober piety. Think of the classic image: dark, solid colors, russets, browns, deep blues, and of course black. The silhouette is modest, designed to obscure the shape of your body rather than accentuate it. You start with a linen shift, your all-purpose undergarment. Over that goes a boned bodice or stays, stiffened with whalebone or reeds, which gives your torso a rigid, conical shape. It's not meant to cinch your waist, but to enforce an unnaturally straight and upright posture, a physical reflection of your moral rectitude. Then come the layers of petticoats, a waistcoat, and finally, the gown. A crisp, white linen coif covers your hair, and a cap or hat is worn over that. The overall impression is one of impeccable, starched neatness and unyielding modesty. Your clothing is a walking sermon. It tells the world that you are not vain, not frivolous, but a serious woman devoted to God, family, and work. This carefully constructed image of pristine, righteous simplicity is your shield and your banner in the community. Now, let's peel back those layers and uncover the shocking reality hidden beneath the starched linen. You almost never bathe. Water is a precious, labor-intensive commodity that has to be hauled from a well or stream and heated over that smoky fire. A full-body bath is a rare, perhaps yearly, event. Your primary method of cleanliness is to change your linen shift. This innermost layer is designed to absorb the sweat, grime, and oils from your body. In an ideal world, you would change it frequently, but laundry is a monumental task. It involves boiling water, harsh lye soap made from ash and animal fat, and endless scrubbing and wringing, a process that can take 2 full days. In reality, you wear your shift until it is palpably dirty, perhaps for a week or more. The outer layers of your clothing, the heavy wool waistcoat and gown, are rarely, if ever, washed. They are too difficult to clean and dry. Instead, you might sponge off a spot or brush away dirt, but the accumulated sweat, grease from cooking, smoke from the fire, and everyday filth simply work their way into the fibers. The truly gross-out detail is the smell. We imagine the past with a sort of historical deodorizer, but the reality was pungent. In the summer, you are sweating profusely under all those layers, and that sweat has nowhere to go but into the linen. In the winter, you wear the same heavy garments day in and day out, sleeping in many of them for warmth. The resulting body odor, mingled with the smells of soot, cooking grease, and manure tracked in from outside, would be overpowering to a modern nose. And it's not just you. Everyone smells this way. It is the baseline aroma of humanity. To combat this, you might use a pomander, a ball of fragrant spices, or tuck a sachet of dried herbs like lavender or rosemary into your clothes. But these don't eliminate the odor, they just mingle with it, creating a complex and potent perfume of piety and filth. The pristine white coif and collar, the only parts of your linen that are truly visible, are a carefully maintained illusion of cleanliness that conceals a very different reality just an inch beneath the surface. So why this disconnect? Why the obsession with the appearance of cleanliness while living in what we would consider squalor? The answer lies in their understanding of dirt and godliness. For the Puritans, cleanliness was indeed next to godliness, but they defined cleanliness differently. The most important thing was the visible part. A starched white collar and cuffs demonstrated that you were an orderly and diligent person, not lazy or slovenly. It was a sign of social respectability and moral fibre. What went on underneath, the invisible grime and smell, was less of a concern. Their concept of disease, remember, was tied to miasmas and imbalances of the body's humours, not to microscopic germs. They didn't associate body odour with a health risk. In fact, a bit of a personal aroma was considered natural and even healthy. Furthermore, the sumptuary laws of the time regulated what you could wear based on your social class. Bright colours, lace and silk were seen as signs of vanity and pride, sins that could corrupt the soul and disrupt the social order. Your sober, dark clothing was a uniform of humility. The incredible labour required to maintain even the illusion of cleanliness was, like all hardship, a test of your character. A truly pious woman could manage her household and present a clean face to the world, no matter the underlying reality. This constant, demanding work of maintaining appearances, of managing the endless cycle of dirt and decay, extends from your clothing to your food, to your very home. Your life is a battle against the forces of chaos, and one of your most important battlegrounds is the small plot of land just outside your door. It's your kitchen garden, a place of vibrant life that provides sustenance for your family, but which also holds remedies for your ailments and, hidden among the helpful leaves, the power to kill. Just a few steps from your door lies your garden. It is not a place for ornamental flowers or manicured lawns. It is a laboratory for survival, a pharmacy, and a pantry, all in one. In the idealized vision of your life, this garden is a little patch of Eden, a testament to your skill and diligence as a good wife. It represents your ability to tame the wilderness, to bring forth orderly rows of life-giving plants from the chaotic soil of the new world. Here, under your care, grow the staples that supplement your family's diet: sturdy cabbages, hearty beans, pungent onions, and sprawling pumpkin vines. You cultivate herbs that make the monotonous diet of salted meat and corn bearable: parsley, sage, thyme, and marjoram. The garden is a symbol of female productivity and domestic virtue. Neighbours walking past on their way to the meeting house would see your well-tended plot and nod in approval. A flourishing garden meant a well-ordered household, a sign that a competent and pious woman was in charge. This is the glamorous illusion, a sunny, green space of wholesome, life-sustaining bounty. Now, let's look closer, past the cheerful pumpkin blossoms and neat rows of beans. Let's crouch down and examine the other plants growing here, the ones that reveal the shocking reality of your medical care. Your garden is your medicine cabinet, and it is filled with plants that walk a razor-thin line between remedy and poison. You have no doctor to call, no pharmacy to visit. When a child has a fever, a husband has a stomach ailment, or you suffer from one of the many female complaints, you turn to this patch of earth. You grow feverfew to treat headaches and comfrey, or knitbone, to make poultices for sprains and broken bones. For a cough, you might brew a tea from horehound. But mixed in among these relatively benign remedies are plants with a much darker potential. You might cultivate foxglove, with its beautiful, bell-shaped flowers. You know that a carefully prepared infusion of its leaves can help with dropsy or swelling, what we would now call congestive heart failure. But you also know that a slightly larger dose is a potent and lethal poison, causing nausea, hallucinations, and a swift, agonizing death. The truly visceral reality lies in the trial and error nature of this herbal medicine. There are no standardized doses. You are working from knowledge passed down from your mother or a neighbor, a jumble of practical experience, folklore, and outright superstition. Is it one leaf of the foxglove, or two? Should it be steeped in hot water or cold? For how long? A simple mistake in preparation could turn a life-saving medicine into a fatal toxin. You also grow plants to manage your own fertility: herbs like tansy or pennyroyal, known as emmenagogues, which can induce menstruation and in a high enough dose cause an abortion. The use of these plants is a hidden, dangerous secret among the women of the community. The tea made too strong could lead to violent hemorrhaging and death. Your garden, this supposed symbol of life, contains a hidden arsenal of potent, unregulated drugs. It's a place where a desperate attempt to heal could easily end in a quiet, unexplained death, written off by the community as another instance of God's inscrutable will. Why was this dangerous, self-service pharmacy the only option available? The answer is a combination of necessity, worldview, and the professional vacuum of the time. There were very few university-trained physicians in the colonies, and those that existed were expensive and located in larger towns. You had no choice but to be your family's primary healthcare provider. The dominant medical theory, remember, was based on Hume's idea that illness was caused by an imbalance of blood, phlegm, black bile and yellow bile. Herbal remedies were believed to work by restoring this balance. A plant's properties were often determined by the doctrine of signatures, a belief that God had marked plants to indicate their use. For example, the spotted leaves of lungwort resembled a diseased lung, so it was used for respiratory ailments. A plant's shape, color, or location of growth was a divine clue to its purpose. This worldview blended what we would call science and magic into a single, seamless system. Therefore, your gardening and herbalism were not just practical chores, they were acts of deciphering God's hidden messages in nature. The risk of poisoning was ever present, but it was viewed as part of the mysterious and often dangerous power of God's creation. He used what he provided, prayed for wisdom in its application, and accepted the outcome as part of his divine plan. The knowledge you hold about these plants, both the nourishing and the noxious, is valuable. It forms a part of a vast, unwritten encyclopedia of female wisdom that is shared and policed not in books or lectures but through a constant, humming network of communication. It is a system often dismissed as idle chatter, but in your world, it is one of the most powerful forces shaping your daily life, the invisible web of female gossip. Your day is a circuit of prescribed locations, your home, your garden, the well, and perhaps a neighbor's house to borrow a tool or lend a hand. As you move through these spaces, you talk. You exchange pleasantries with the woman drawing water next to you. You share a morsel of news with a neighbor over the fence. You murmur with your sister while spinning wool by the fire. This is the world of female conversation, and the glamorous illusion, often perpetuated by the men in your community, is that it's nothing more than gossip, frivolous, trivial, and slightly sinful talk about bonnet ribbons and lumpy porridge. It's seen as the idle chatter of unoccupied minds, a harmless vice that keeps women busy while men attend to the serious business of theology and governance. The very word gossip originally meant God's sibling, referring to the close female companions who attended a birth, but it had already begun to take on its modern, derogatory meaning. This public image is one of female conversation as background noise, fundamentally unimportant to the real work of the colony. Now, let's lean in and listen to what's really being said in those hushed tones. Let's decode the true meaning behind the talk of a neighbor's new pewter spoons or another's sickly child. The shocking reality is that this network of gossip is not frivolous at all. It is the primary mechanism of social control, a sophisticated information brokerage, and a vital tool for survival in a society where you have no formal power. This is your intelligence network. Through this web, you learn who is a reliable trading partner and who is likely to shortchange you. You learn which families are struggling and may need a charitable visit, which is both a genuine act of kindness and a subtle investigation into their household management. You learn which young men are courting which young women, ensuring that no secret or unsuitable matches are being made. This is where reputations are built and destroyed. A woman whose children are consistently dirty, whose baking is always burnt, or whose speech is a little too sharp will find herself the subject of conversation. The whispers serve as a warning, conform to the community's standards, or risk being ostracized. The truly visceral aspect of this is how quickly this network can be weaponized. Imagine you have a dispute with a neighbor over a wandering pig that has rooted up your precious garden. You have no legal standing to sue him. You cannot formally complain to the town elders. But you can talk. You can mention to a friend at the well how strange it is that Goodman Smith's pigs are always underfed. You can wonder aloud to your sister if he is falling into debt. These small, whispered seeds, planted in the fertile ground of the gossip network, can grow into a full-blown social crisis for the offending party. He might find others unwilling to help him at harvest time, his wife might be subtly shunned by the other women, and eventually, the pressure will become so great that he will be forced to control his pig and perhaps even offer you an apology. Gossip is your court of law, your newspaper, and your weapon. It is how you enforce the unwritten rules of society, and it is the only way you can exert influence on the men who hold all the official power. So why was this informal, often brutal system of social policing not only tolerated but essential? The reason is rooted in the Puritan obsession with communal holiness. Your society was not a collection of individuals, it was a single body, and a sin or disorder in one part affected the whole. The magistrates and ministers were responsible for the formal, legal, and theological oversight of the community, but they could not be everywhere at once. They could not see into the day-to-day running of every household. The female gossip network, therefore, functioned as the community's immune system. It was a decentralized, highly effective surveillance system that monitored the moral and social health of every family. It identified potential problems: laziness, deceit, excessive pride, marital strife long before they erupted into public scandals that would require official intervention. The ministers might preach against the sin of idle talk from the pulpit, but they tacitly relied on this female network to maintain the very order they preached. It was a necessary, if officially denigrated, part of the system. Your participation in it was not just a pastime, it was a civic duty, a crucial part of your role in upholding the covenant. Without this constant, humming web of information, the fragile social order of the settlement could easily unravel. This network of information and social control operates 6 days a week. But on the 7th day, the Sabbath, all such worldly chatter must cease. On that day, you are required to enter the one place where your voice is meant to fall completely silent, where you are expected to be an object of piety, seen but never heard. You must gather with your family and proceed to the community's most important building, the meeting house. The Sabbath dawns, and a hush falls over the settlement. The usual sounds of axes, hammers, and children's games are replaced by an expectant silence. This is the Lord's Day, the pinnacle of your week, and its central focus is the meeting house. The illusion presented to you, and the one you are expected to believe, is that this is a moment of profound communal unity and spiritual nourishment. You put on your best, though still sober, garments, ones with the crisply starched collar and cuffs you worked so hard to maintain. You walk with your family to the plain, unadorned timber building that serves as the heart of your town. Inside, there are no stained glass windows, no incense, no ornate altar. There is only plain wood and clear glass, designed to focus the mind entirely on the Word of God. You take your place on a hard, backless bench. The seating is not random. It is meticulously arranged by the town elders to reflect the social hierarchy of the community. The most prominent families sit at the front, others are arranged by age, wealth, and social standing. Your assigned seat is a public declaration of your family's place in God's order. The glamorous image is one of a whole community, from the governor to the humblest servant, gathered together as one, listening intently to the minister unpack the eternal truths of Scripture. Now, let's settle onto the hard bench with you and feel the shocking reality of this experience. First, the cold. In the winter, the meeting house is unheated. There is no fireplace, as that would be a worldly comfort, a distraction from holy duty. You sit for hours in a room that is often close to freezing. You might bring a small, heated soapstone wrapped in cloth to press against your feet, but the penetrating New England cold is inescapable. Your breath plumes in the air. Your feet and fingers go numb. The sermon is not a gentle, 20-minute homily. It is an intellectual and theological marathon, often lasting 2 to 3 hours. And you will attend 2 of these services, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. The minister, elevated in his pulpit, will expound on complex doctrines of predestination, infant damnation, and the intricate signs of divine providence. You are expected to sit ramrod straight, without fidgeting or dozing. The church official, the tithingman, patrols the aisles with a long staff. On one end is a brass knob to rap the head of any man who falls asleep, and on the other, a foxtail or feather to tickle the nose of a sleeping woman or child. The most jarring reality is your complete and total silence. You are here to absorb, not to participate. The entire service is centered on the male voice, the minister who preaches, the elder who leads the psalms, the magistrate who might make an announcement. Women are forbidden from speaking in church. The words of the Apostle Paul are taken as literal, unshakable law. Let your women keep silence in the churches, for for it is not permitted unto them to speak. If you have a question about the sermon's intricate theological points, you are to ask your husband at home, assuming he can explain it. You cannot lead a prayer. You cannot offer a testament. Your role is to be a silent, receptive vessel for the word of God as interpreted and delivered by men. You are a living symbol of piety, but your own spiritual insights, your own voice, have no place here. You are seen, but you must not be heard. So why this rigid, uncomfortable, and silencing ordeal? Why was this the chosen form of worship for a people so passionate about their faith? The reason is, once again, the Puritan obsession with order and their deep-seated fear of religious error. They had fled England to escape what they saw as the sensual, ritualistic and popish corruption of the Anglican Church, with its chanting, its scripted prayers and its elaborate vestments. Their form of worship was a deliberate rejection of all that. The plainness of the meeting-house, the lack of heat, and the punishing length of the sermon were all designed to strip away worldly distractions and focus the mind on pure, unadulterated theology. It was an intellectual and spiritual trial, and enduring it was a sign of a strong faith. The silencing of women was also a direct reaction to what they had witnessed in England. They were deeply suspicious of the more radical Protestant sects, like the Quakers, who allowed women to preach and prophesy. They associated the female voice in church with emotionalism, disorder, and heresy. For the Puritans, faith was not a matter of feeling or personal revelation, it was a matter of intellect and doctrine, which they considered the exclusive domain of educated men. Your silence was a firewall against the chaos of religious enthusiasm. It was a cornerstone of the stable, patriarchal order they were trying to build. Your presence was mandatory, but your participation was forbidden. As you sit on that hard bench, the minister's words washing over you, you are acutely aware of your own body, the cold in your bones, the ache in your back, and perhaps the subtle, internal shifts and cycles that are unique to you as a woman. These natural rhythms are understood not through a lens of biology, but through the same theological framework that silences you in church. Your very biology is seen as a source of spiritual weakness, a secret sickness that connects you to Eve's original sin. In the public sphere, your body is meant to be an instrument of piety. Its upright posture in your stiffened bodies, its modest covering, its silent presence in the meeting-house of this project's an image of control and submission to a divine, patriarchal order. The idealized female body is one that is tireless in its work, fruitful in childbearing, and free from any signs of worldly vanity or weakness. It is a clean, well-running machine dedicated to the service of God and family. The cycles and functions that make it uniquely female are rarely, if ever, spoken of in public. They are shrouded in euphemism and a sense of profound privacy. The illusion is one of a body that is, if not perfect, at least perfectly managed. It's messy. Realities hidden away in the service of a serene and orderly public presentation. You are a good wife, a pillar of the community, and your physical form is expected to reflect that stability. Now, let's go behind the closed doors of your home, into the private reality of your physical existence. The shocking truth is that your natural bodily functions are viewed not as biology, but as a constant, humiliating reminder of your inherent spiritual corruption. Your menstrual cycle, a process we understand as a normal and healthy part of life, is seen through a dark, theological lens. It is referred to in hushed tones as the curse or the flowers, and it is considered a state of ritual impurity, a direct legacy of Eve's sin. The Old Testament laws in Leviticus, which describe a menstruating woman as unclean, are not just ancient history to you, they are a living reality that shapes your self-perception. During your period, you might feel a sense of shame, a feeling that your body has betrayed you, marking you as physically and spiritually lesser. There are no convenient sanitary products. You must make do with folded rags of old linen or wool, which are difficult to wash and add yet another arduous task to your laundry days. The potential for leaks and stains is a source of constant, low-grade anxiety, a fear of public shame for a private, unclean condition. The truly visceral reality extends to every phase of your reproductive life. Pregnancy, while celebrated, is also a time of great physical vulnerability, and any complication is scrutinized for its spiritual meaning. A miscarriage might be interpreted as a sign of God's displeasure. Menopause, which you might call the change of life, is a deeply unsettling and poorly understood transition. The hot flashes, mood swings, and other symptoms are not seen as hormonal shifts but as a potential breakdown of the body's humoral balance, or worse, as a sign of spiritual malaise. It is a time when a woman's body is seen as becoming disordered, unpredictable, and even dangerous, And this connects to the broader view of female health. Any ailment that is specific to women, from menstrual cramps to postpartum depression, is often lumped under the vague diagnosis of hysteria or vapors. The root cause was believed to be a wandering womb, the idea that the uterus could become detached and move around the body, pressing on other organs and causing emotional and physical distress. Your biology is not your own. It is a battleground of sin, divine punishment, and mysterious, unruly forces. Why this profound medical and spiritual distrust of the female body? The answer is woven deep into the fabric of Western thought, from ancient Greek medicine to medieval Christian theology, all of which was inherited by your Puritan leaders. The Greek physician Galen, whose theories dominated medicine for over 1,000 years, taught that women were essentially imperfect men, colder, wetter, and fundamentally weaker in their physical constitution. Christian theologians then layered the story of Eve onto this pre-existing medical misogyny. Eve's sin was not just an act of disobedience, it was a corruption that was passed down through her female descendants, and its primary physical manifestation was in the pains and blood of the reproductive cycle. Therefore, your body's unique functions were a constant, physical sermon on female sinfulness. The male body was seen as the stable, rational norm, while the female body was cyclical, emotional, and prone to disorder. The wandering womb was not just a bizarre medical theory, it was a perfect metaphor for how they viewed the female nature itself: unstable, irrational, and in need of firm male control. This worldview made it nearly impossible to see female biology as natural or healthy. It was, by its very definition, a secret sickness, a sign of a fallen state. This pervasive sense of being physically and spiritually flawed had one major exception. There was one area where your intellect, as a woman, was not only permitted, but actively cultivated. The community demanded that you acquire a specific, and for the time, relatively rare skill. It was a skill that promised salvation, but it came with very strict rules about how it could be used. You were taught how to read. In a world where formal education is a rare privilege, mostly reserved for boys destined for ministry or leadership, you possess a remarkable skill: you can read. The glamorous illusion surrounding female literacy in your community is that it is a sign of immense piety and intellectual seriousness. New England has a surprisingly high rate of literacy compared to other parts of the world at the time, and this includes women. You were likely taught your letters as a child, either by your mother at home, or in a simple dame school run by a local woman. The ability to read is framed as a sacred duty. It is the key that unlocks the Word of God. The ultimate goal of your literacy is not worldly knowledge or personal pleasure, but direct, unmediated access to the Holy Bible. The image is a powerful one: the Goodwife, after a long day of labor, sitting by the fire with her children, her finger tracing the words of Scripture as she reads aloud, filling her home with holy teachings. Your literacy is seen as a tool for salvation, a way to ensure that you and your family can understand God's laws and strive to live by them. Now, let's look at the fine print on this intellectual gift. Let's examine the profound limitations placed upon your reading. The shocking reality is that you are taught to read, but you are actively discouraged from writing. Reading is a passive act of reception. Writing is an active act of creation and expression, and that is considered the domain of men. Your signature, if you can even make one, is likely a shaky, unpracticed version of your name, or more commonly, just a simple C. While your husband keeps accounts, writes letters, and participates in the textual world of commerce and law, your literacy is confined to a single purpose and, for the most part, a single book. You are handed the key to the library of human knowledge, but you are told you may only open one door. You are not meant to read for pleasure. Novels, plays, or poetry are seen as frivolous at best, and dangerously corrupting at worst. Reading for intellectual curiosity, to learn about philosophy, science, or the wider world, is viewed with suspicion. It could lead to pride, to questioning authority, to developing ideas outside the strict theological framework of your community. The most visceral part of this reality is the internal conflict it creates. The act of reading, by its very nature, opens the mind. As you read the Bible, you are not just passively absorbing words. You are interpreting, questioning, and forming your own understanding. What happens when your personal reading of a passage conflicts with the minister's sermon? What happens when you read the stories of powerful biblical women Deborah, Esther, Jael, and feel a flicker of inspiration that clashes with the doctrine of female submission you hear every Sunday? This flicker of independent thought is a dangerous spark. You must learn to suppress it, to tell yourself that your own interpretation is likely flawed, a product of your weaker female intellect. Your literacy is a powerful tool that you are simultaneously encouraged to use and taught to mistrust. It is a form of intellectual bondage, where you are given access to the text, but denied the authority to have your own thoughts about it. To read a forbidden book, or to write down your own private reflections, would be a profound act of rebellion. So, why this strange paradox? Why invest in teaching women to read, only to place such severe restrictions on how they use that skill? The reason is central to the entire Protestant Reformation. A core tenet of Puritan belief was sola scriptura, belief that the Bible alone is the ultimate authority for faith and life. For this to work, every individual, including women, had to be able to read the Bible for themselves. They believed that salvation was a personal matter between an individual soul and God, and it could not be mediated by priests or bishops. Therefore, teaching your daughter to read was as essential as teaching her to spin or cook. It was a fundamental tool for her soul's survival. However, the Puritan leadership, being deeply patriarchal, was also terrified of the chaos that could result from millions of individual interpretations. Their solution was to control the context of that reading. They controlled the interpretation through the weekly, multi-hour sermons, where the minister provided the correct understanding of the scriptures. They controlled the availability of other texts, limiting access to books that might challenge their worldview. And they created a culture where writing, the act of formulating and disseminating one's own ideas, was gendered as a male activity. Your literacy was meant to make you a better, more knowledgeable servant of the existing order, not to empower you to challenge it. This limited, controlled power is a recurring theme in your life. It is a dangerous kind of power, one that is granted under specific circumstances, but can be snatched away in an instant. There is one situation, however, where this dynamic is thrown into stark relief, a time when you might suddenly be thrust into a position of legal and financial authority that makes you both powerful and profoundly vulnerable: the death of your husband. The day you have long dreaded, yet statistically expected, arrives. Your husband dies. He might be taken by a sudden illness, a farming accident, or one of the many epidemics that sweep through the colonies. As his widow, you are suddenly plunged into a new and bewildering role. The glamorous illusion of widowhood, at least from a legal and social perspective, is that you are finally granted a measure of respect and autonomy. You are no longer femme covert, the covered woman. You emerge from your husband's legal shadow and become femme soul, a woman on her own. For the first time since your marriage, you are a legal person. You can now own property, sign contracts, and represent yourself in court. The community looks upon a pious widow with a certain kind of reverence. You are seen as a figure of tragic strength, a woman who must now manage her household and raise her children alone, guided by her faith and the memory of her departed husband. Your minister will preach sermons about your resilience, holding you up as an example of godly fortitude in the face of terrible loss. This new status affords you a level of authority and public recognition that was unthinkable while your husband lived. Now, let's pull back the sober black veil of mourning and examine the shocking reality of your new position. Your newfound power is terrifyingly precarious and comes with a heavy dose of suspicion. While you now have legal rights, those rights are constrained. You are typically entitled to a widow's third, a lifetime interest in 1/3 of your late husband's real estate. This is not for you to own outright. It is for your use during your lifetime to support yourself and your children. You can farm it, rent it out, but you cannot sell it. Upon your death, it reverts to your husband's male heirs. The other 2/3 of the estate are often controlled by male executors, who watch your every move. Every financial decision you make is scrutinized. Are you managing the land properly? Are you wasting the assets that rightfully belong to your sons? You are suddenly thrust into the male world of business and law, a world for which you have little to no training, and you must navigate it while surrounded by men who may resent your new authority. The truly visceral reality is the social tightrope you must walk. You are a woman with property and a degree of independence. This makes you an anomaly in the patriarchal order, and an anomaly is a threat. Your community is deeply suspicious of a woman who controls her own destiny. Your every action is interpreted through a lens of mistrust. If you manage your affairs well, you are seen as cunning and perhaps too masculine. If you struggle, it is taken as proof that women are not equipped for such responsibilities. You are also a single woman in a society obsessed with marriage. The pressure to remarry is immense, not for love, but for stability and to restore the proper order of a male-headed household. Yet, your choice of a new husband is fraught with peril. Suitors may be after your property, not your companionship. If you remarry, you once again become femme covet, and all of your property, all of your legal rights, are immediately transferred to your new husband. You risk losing everything you have just gained. You are a queen for a day, holding a brief and dangerous power that society is eager for you to surrender. So why create this temporary, unstable category of the powerful widow? Why not just pass the property directly to the sons or a male guardian? The reason is a mixture of pragmatism and English common law tradition. The widow's third was a long-standing legal principle designed to prevent widows and their children from becoming destitute and thus a burden on the community. It was a form of social security, a safety net woven into the legal system. It was not about empowering women, it was about ensuring social stability. The community had a vested interest in your survival and the survival of your children. A starving family was a sign of a disordered, uncharitable community, a crack in the covenant. The Puritans, for all their rigidity, were intensely practical people. They knew that a woman on her own needed resources to manage a household. However, this practical necessity clashed with their deep-seated belief in a patriarchal hierarchy. The result was this compromised status. You are given the tools to survive, but you are watched, constrained, and encouraged to return to a state of submission through remarriage as quickly as possible. Your brief power is a necessary evil, tolerated only as long as it is absolutely necessary. Whether you are a wife or a widow, one of your central, all-consuming struggles remains the same. It is a battle fought daily inside your home, a frantic race against an invisible enemy that threatens to spoil your food, ruin your hard work, and bring sickness and death to your family. It is the constant, relentless battle against rot and ruin. Your role as a good wife is, in many ways, defined by your ability to provide. The glamorous illusion is that of abundance and wholesome sustenance, a table groaning with the fruits of your labor. It's the image of a Thanksgiving feast, a roasted turkey, piles of squash and corn, bread fresh from the hearth, and pies made from pumpkins grown in your own garden. This is the picture of colonial prosperity, a testament to God's blessing on this new land of milk and honey. Your pantry, in this idealized vision, is a treasure trove of preserved goodness, neatly organized and ready to see your family through the long, harsh winter. There are barrels of salted fish and pork, strings of dried apples and beans, crocks of pickled vegetables and shelves of jellies and jams. This image is one of control, foresight, and domestic mastery. You are the general in a war against hunger, and your well-stocked larder is your fortress. Now, let's push open the door to that pantry and take a deep, unfiltered sniff. The shocking reality is that your life is a desperate, non-stop race against decay, and the line between preserved and putrid is dangerously thin. You live without refrigeration. The only tools you have to fight the relentless onslaught of bacteria, mold and rot are salt, smoke, sugar and drying. Every season brings a frantic burst of preservation activity. In the fall, you spend weeks butchering the pig and laboriously rubbing salt into every inch of the meat before packing it into barrels. You stand over that smoky fire for days on end, curing hams and fish. You painstakingly slice apples and thread them onto long strings to hang from the rafters, hoping they dry before they mold. You boil down berries with precious, expensive sugar to make preserves, praying you've achieved the right consistency to prevent them from fermenting. The truly gross-out reality is the constant uncertainty and the frequent, disgusting failures. You open the salt pork barrel one day to find that the brine has failed and the meat is slick with a rainbow-colored, foul-smelling slime. You take down a string of dried beans from the attic and find them riddled with weevils. You unseal a crock of pickled cabbage to be met with a puff of gas and the acrid stench of spoilage. Food poisoning is a common and often fatal occurrence, but you don't have the language for it. A bout of violent vomiting and diarrhea is called the flux or a colic, and it's usually blamed on an imbalance of the humours or God's will, not the slightly off piece of salted fish you ate for dinner. You develop a palate that is highly tolerant of flavours we would find repulsive, the gamey taste of meat that is just on the edge of turning, the sour tang of milk that is beginning to curdle, the pervasive saltiness of almost every savoury dish. You become an expert in rescuing food, skimming the mould off the top of a pot of stew, cutting the rotten parts off a precious apple, or boiling a piece of tainted meat with strong herbs to mask the flavour. This is not a matter of choice. It is a matter of survival. Wasting food is not only impractical, it is considered a sin. So why was this high-stakes gamble with food safety the only way? The answer is simple necessity combined with a prescientific understanding of the world. They had no other technology. The methods of salting, smoking, and drying were ancient techniques, the best humanity had devised for millennia to survive through lean times. The concept of microbes, of bacteria and fungi as the invisible agents of decay was completely unknown. Foliage was a mysterious process, often attributed to phases of the moon, damp air, or supernatural forces. You might have a series of folk beliefs about how to best preserve food, butchering only when the moon is waning, for instance, but these were shots in the dark. The acceptance of this constant battle was part of the broader Puritan worldview of life as a trial. The world was a fallen place, and decay was a physical manifestation of that spiritual reality. Just as sin corrupted the soul, rot corrupted the food. Your duty was to fight against it with all your might, using the tools God had provided. A successful preservation was a sign of God's favor and your own diligence. A failure was a test of your faith and a reminder of the inherent imperfection of the earthly world. This constant anxiety about the physical safety of your family within the walls of your home is mirrored by a much larger, more terrifying anxiety about the world outside your small settlement. The threat of decay from within is matched by the threat of violence from without. The greatest fear is not a simple, clean death in battle, but a fate that is far more existentially terrifying, a story that will be told and retold around the fire, the captivity narrative. Your small settlement is an island, a tiny pocket of what you call civilization carved out of a vast and mysterious wilderness. The glamorous illusion you are told, and that you tell your children, is that you are on a divine errand. You are God's chosen people, bringing light to a dark place, taming the savage land and building a new Jerusalem. The forest that surrounds you, in this telling, is a symbol of God's magnificent creation, a storehouse of resources, timber, fur, and game provided for your benefit. The native peoples who inhabit this forest are seen as heathens, souls to be converted to Christianity. The relationship, in this idealized version, is one of a firm but benevolent superiority. You are bringing them the gift of salvation and a more orderly way of life. The blockhouse at the edge of the village and the muskets hanging over the mantles are presented as prudent precautions, necessary tools to maintain peace and security in this holy enterprise. Now, let's extinguish the lamp and sit in the darkness for a moment, listening to the sounds of the night, the snap of a twig, the howl of a wolf. Let's feel the deep, gnawing fear that is the shocking reality of your relationship with the world just beyond your garden fence. The greatest terror is not a pitched battle between men with muskets. It is a sudden, chaotic raid on your home. It is the blood-curdling war cry that shatters the pre-dawn quiet, the splintering of your door, and the horrifying realization that your family is being overwhelmed. But even death, in that moment, is not the ultimate fear. The ultimate fear is being taken alive. It is being captured. For a woman, this fear is multifold. It is the fear of physical violence, of being forced to march for miles through unforgiving terrain, of starvation, and of sexual assault. But even these terrible physical fates are secondary to the primary, soul-deep terror, the fear of being Indianized. The most visceral, shocking reality is what this capture means for your soul and your identity. To be taken captive by the native people of Swampanogue, the Narragansett, the Abenakis, to be dragged away from everything that defines you. You are torn from your family, your community, your church. You are stripped of your modest English clothes and forced to wear animal skins. You are made to eat strange, savage foods. You will witness, and perhaps be forced to participate in rituals you believe are pagan and demonic. The ultimate horror is that you might, over time, begin to adapt. You might learn their language, come to understand their ways, and even form bonds with your captors. This process of cultural assimilation is seen as a form of spiritual death. For your community back home, you would become something monstrous, a white Indian, a soul lost not just to the community, but to God. You would be seen as having gone native, a betrayal of your race, your culture, and your religion. The stories that circulate in the settlements, the captivity narratives that are read aloud, are tales of horror that reinforce this fear. So why was this fate considered so much worse than death? Why was the idea of cultural assimilation so existentially terrifying? The reason lies at the core of the Puritan identity. They defined themselves in opposition to what they considered savage. Their orderliness, their rigid social structure, their literacy, their agriculture, and most importantly, Their religion, all of these things were what made them civilized and English. The native peoples, with their different social structures, their oral traditions, their relationship with the land, and their spiritual beliefs, represented the polar opposite of this identity. They were the other against which the Puritans defined themselves. Therefore, to be assimilated into that culture was to lose the very essence of your English, Christian self. It was a dissolution of identity, a spiritual contamination. The captivity narratives that became a popular genre of literature in the colonies served a powerful propaganda purpose. They were not just adventure stories, they were theological warnings. They reinforced the boundary between the civilized and the savage, justified the ongoing conflict over land, and served as a potent reminder to the community to remain unified and vigilant against the corrupting influence of the wilderness and its people. Your greatest fear was not just of being killed, but of being erased. This profound fear of losing control, of having your identity dissolved, is a constant theme. It is present in the fear of capture, the fear of a disorderly household, and even the fear of your own words. The community has a specific and terrifyingly public method for punishing women who fail to control their speech, who step outside the bounds of quiet submission. It is a punishment designed not just to cause pain, but to inflict the maximum possible social shame. The ideal woman in your community is quiet, her voice soft, her opinions kept to herself, or shared only with her husband. She is the embodiment of meekness and gentle submission, a peaceful presence in the home and a silent observer in public. This is the glamorous illusion of female speech, a carefully controlled, melodious murmur that contributes to the overall harmony of the community. A woman's words, in this ideal, are meant to be soothing, pious, and supportive. She might be praised for her ability to give a soft answer that turneth away wrath. The speech is a tool for peacemaking within her domestic sphere. To speak too much, too loudly, or too critically is seen as a deeply unfeminine failing, a sign of a disorderly and ungodly spirit. The public image you are meant to project is one of serene, quiet contentment with your God-given lot. Now, let's imagine you have a grievance. Perhaps your neighbor has been shorting you in trade, or you have a sharp-tongued disagreement with another woman, or you publicly question the decision of a town elder. You speak your mind, forcefully and without apology. The shocking reality of what can happen next is a form of punishment designed for ultimate humiliation. You might be formally charged as a common scold. A scold is a legal category for a woman deemed to be a habitual troublemaker, a nag, or a woman with a sharp and unruly tongue. If you are convicted, your punishment is not a simple fine or a day in the stocks. You might be sentenced to the ducking stool or, more horrifyingly, forced to wear a scold's bridle. Let's linger on the visceral reality of the bridle, also known as a brank. This is not a metaphor. It is a heavy iron cage that is locked around your head. It consists of a framework of bars and a locking mechanism at the back. The most horrific feature is the curb plate, a piece of iron, often sharpened or covered in spikes, that is forced into your mouth and pressed down on top of your tongue. It makes speech impossible. If you try to move your tongue, it is cut and lacerated. The pain is immense, and the humiliation is total. Once the bridle is locked in place, you are paraded through the center of town, led by a rope, for all your neighbors to see. Men, women, and children would gather to mock you, to point at your public shaming. You are being punished not just for your words, but for the crime of having an independent, defiant voice. The bridle is a physical manifestation of these communities' desire to silence you, to literally and brutally lock down the offending part of your body. It is a tool of psychological terror as much as physical torment, a warning to all other women of the price of speaking out of turn. So why such a bizarre and cruel punishment? Why not a fine, a whipping, or a day in the stocks, which were common for other minor offences? The reason the scold's bridle existed was because a woman's unregulated speech was seen as a profound threat to the social and theological order. In a patriarchal society that demanded female silence and submission, a scolding woman was not just an annoyance, she was a rebel. She was subverting the divine hierarchy. Her words were seen as a source of discord that could poison relationships, undermine male authority, and disrupt the peace of the community. Remember the gossip network, it was a powerful tool, and when a woman used that power in a way the male authorities deemed destructive or insubordinate, the reaction was severe. The punishment had to be as theatrical and humiliating as possible to serve as a powerful public deterrent. The ducking stool, where a woman was tied to a chair on a long lever and repeatedly plunged into a cold river, served a similar purpose of public spectacle and torment. These punishments were not about correcting a minor sin, they were about crushing a rebellion at its saucy woman's mouth. They were a visceral demonstration of the community's power to enforce conformity and silence dissent, particularly female dissent. This deep-seated fear of a woman's power, her words, her knowledge of herbs, her very nature could curdle into something far more deadly. A lifetime of quiet neighborhood disputes, personal resentments, and simmering mistrust, when combined with a bout of misfortune, could suddenly ignite. A neighbor's cow dies, a child falls ill, a batch of butter won't churn. The community looks for a cause, for someone to blame. And sometimes, their gaze falls upon a woman who is just a little too different, a little too outspoken, a little too independent. The suspicion hardens into a terrifying accusation, a death sentence in the making, witchcraft. Your community is built on a foundation of visible, demonstrable piety. The glamorous illusion is that you live in a society of saints, a covenanted people walking in the light of God's grace. Every Sunday, you see your neighbors in the meeting house, their faces scrubbed, their expressions sober and devout. You exchange pleasantries that are laced with scripture. You work together in communal tasks like raising a barn or clearing a field, presenting a united front against the wilderness. The social contract is one of mutual support and shared faith. Disagreements are expected to be handled peacefully, and charity is meant to be extended to those in need. The public image is one of a tight-knit, harmonious Christian community, where love for your neighbor is a sacred duty and everyone is striving together toward the common goal of building God's kingdom on earth. Now, let's look beneath the surface of that communal harmony, into the dark undercurrents of envy, resentment, and suspicion that run through the village. The shocking reality is that this cohesive community is a powder keg of unresolved tensions. You live in close quarters with your neighbors your entire life. You know who owes whom a small debt, whose cow trampled whose corn last year, which family got a slightly better plot of land than yours. These minor conflicts and petty jealousies rarely erupt into open confrontation. Instead, they simmer for years, creating a thick, invisible web of grudges. Furthermore, your theology teaches you that the devil is a real, active presence in the world, constantly seeking to undermine your holy experiment. He is not an abstract concept. He is a literal adversary who can grant power to those willing to make a pact with him. When misfortune strikes, a child dies of a sudden fever, a cow stops giving milk, a storm ruins the harvest, it is never just a random act of nature. It is an act of providence. And while it might be God testing you, it could also be the devil, working through a human agent. The truly visceral reality is how this worldview can transform a personal grudge into a lethal accusation. Imagine you are a woman who is slightly outside the norm. Perhaps you are a widow, like we discussed, who has managed her property a little too successfully, making you independent and therefore suspect. Perhaps you are a midwife, whose knowledge of herbs, as we explored, makes you both respected and feared. Perhaps you simply have a sharp tongue and a reputation for being argumentative, like the scold we just pictured. One day, you have a heated argument with your neighbor over a straying chicken. You curse at him in your anger and stalk away. A week later, his prize cow, the mainstay of his family's finances, sickens and dies. In his grief and anger, he doesn't see a coincidence or a common animal disease. He remembers your curse. He sees the work of the devil. He recalls your reputation for being difficult. The whispers begin, drawing on that vast network of gossip. Other neighbors recall small, strange occurrences, a batch of cheese that spoiled after you visited, a strange look you gave a child who then fell ill. The simmering resentments of a dozen other families are added to the fire. Your social quirks are reinterpreted as evidence of a pact with Satan. Your knowledge of herbal remedies is now proof of malevolent magic. Your independence is a sign of your rejection of God's order. A lifetime of quiet distrust suddenly curdles into a formal, deadly accusation of witchcraft. So why did this happen? Why did communities of supposedly rational, devout people turn on their own with such deadly ferocity? The answer is that the witch trials were not a bizarre aberration. They were the logical, terrifying conclusion of this entire Puritan worldview. They believed they were soldiers in a cosmic war between God and Satan, and New England was a critical battlefront. An accused witch was not just a criminal, she was an enemy combatant, a traitor who had sided with Satan to destroy the colony from within. The legal process itself was designed to confirm guilt, not to discover truth. Spectral evidence hath testimony of a victim that your spirit, or spectre, had appeared to them and caused them harm as admissible in court. How could you possibly defend yourself against the claim that your ghost had pinched someone in the night? Furthermore, the trials served as a powerful social release valve. They provided a supernatural explanation for the random misfortunes of life, crop failure, disease, infant mortality, which were terrifyingly common. Blaming a witch was more comforting than accepting a world of random, meaningless suffering. It also served to reinforce social boundaries. The vast majority of those accused were women, and they were often women who, in some way, challenged the patriarchal norms of the community. The trials were a brutal, ultimate expression of the society's fear of female power and a way to purge those who did not or would not conform. Your life, whether it ends in the birthing bed, from a cough brought on by a smoky fire, or at the end of a rope, is a story of immense hardship. It is a story told in the sermons and the court records, but it is also written in a place that no one will ever read. It is an unwritten history, a final testament recorded silently, deep within your own body, in the very structure of your bones. Whether your life ends in the fever of the birthing bed or at the end of a rope, your story, as far as the official world is concerned, is now over. It will be condensed into a single, neat line in the town records: Mary, wife of John, departed this life. If you are fortunate, a simple, slate grey stone will mark your plot in the burial ground. These letters carved by an unsteady hand. This is the glamorous illusion of your legacy, a tidy, respectable conclusion. You will be remembered, if at all, as a good wife, a mother, a silent pillar of the community. Your struggles, your pain, your secret thoughts all are smoothed over and buried under the soil, replaced by a sanitized public epitaph. Your life is flattened into a single, approved dimension, a pious woman who played her part in the great, holy project of the colony and has now gone to her eternal reward. The memory is one of order, faith, and quiet endurance. But let us imagine, for a moment, that we could look deeper than that carved stone. Let us travel past the reach of the written record, past the memory of the living, down into the quiet earth. Here lies the most honest and shocking history of your life, a story told not in ink, but in calcium and phosphorus. It is the unwritten history in your bones. If a scholar from a distant future were to unearth your skeleton, they would read a story far more brutal and true than any sermon or town record. Your skeleton is a cartographer of your pain. Your lower vertebrae are compressed and lipped with arthritis, the permanent signature of decades spent hauling heavy buckets of water, bending over the smoky hearth, and lifting children. The joints in your shoulders and hands tell a similar tale of relentless, repetitive labor. The truly visceral evidence lies in your jaw. Look at your teeth, or the empty sockets where they once were. They are worn down, abraded almost to the gum line. This is not from old age, it is from a lifetime of eating coarse, stone-ground cornmeal. Tiny particles of grit from the millstone were in every loaf of bread, every bowl of porridge, slowly but surely grinding away your enamel. The historian of your bones would see the dark pits of cavities and the evidence of massive, painful abscesses that festered in your jaw for years, with no remedy beyond a desperate prayer or a blacksmith's clumsy, agonizing extraction. The quiet, submissive woman of the official record lived with a chronic, throbbing agony in her mouth that we can barely imagine. Now, look at your pelvis. The forensic gaze would see the subtle scarring on the bone, the telltale signs of the immense physical stress of multiple pregnancies and childbirths, a physical record of that dangerous, female-only ritual we witnessed. And on the inner surface of your ribs, there might be porous lesions, the skeletal whisper of chronic respiratory disease, the legacy of a lifetime spent breathing the thick, acrid smoke from your inefficient fireplace. The very bones of your legs might have faint, horizontal lines visible only by ray, called Harris lines, a permanent scar left by periods of severe malnutrition or illness during your childhood. So why was this stark, physical truth so completely ignored, allowing the sanitized, respectable story to be the only one that survived? The reason is that your world lacked both the tools and the inclination to read this story. To your community, a skeleton was simply a memento mori, a reminder of death and the promise of resurrection. They had no science of bioarchaeology to interpret the tales of suffering written in bone. But more importantly, even if they could, they would not have seen it as a story worth telling. The suffering of the body was the expected, natural state of a fallen world. Your pain was theologically necessary. It was Eve's curse, a trial from God, a sign that you were living a life of pious hardship rather than sinful ease. Your body was merely a temporary, corrupt vessel for your eternal soul. Its aches, breaks, and decay were spiritually insignificant compared to the state of your soul. The official records of birth, marriage, death, property, and church membership were not meant to document your experience. They were meant to document order. They were the accounting books of the covenant. Your personal, physical suffering was simply the cost of doing business, an entry so common it wasn't even worth noting. The truest, most complete history of your life was not the one written by the men who ran your world, but the one you wrote yourself, syllable by syllable, in the language of scars and calluses, fevers and heart itches, all recorded in the silent, faithful archive of your own bones. And so, the story of this life, a life of immense faith and unimaginable hardship, comes to a quiet close. The fierce anxieties that governed your every waking moment, fear of God's wrath, of a dying child, of a spoiling harvest, of a neighbor's accusation, can finally be laid to rest. The constant, gnawing struggle to impose a fragile human order onto a vast and chaotic world is over. All that remains is the deep, profound silence of the earth. The struggles have faded now, like the last embers of the hearth at the end of a long, exhausting day. The shouting of the magistrates and the weeping in the birthing room have all gone quiet, leaving only the soft rustle of the wind in the tall pines that stand watch over your resting place. The pain in your bones has ceased. The crushing weight of the covenant has been lifted. There is nothing left to fear, nothing left to fight. There is only a deep and well-earned peace. What endures is not the suffering, but the simple, unadorned fact of your resilience. You endured. You survived for as long as you could. And now, at long last, it is time to rest. Let the darkness be a soft blanket, and the silence a gentle lullaby. Allow your own busy thoughts to soften and drift away, carried on that quiet breeze, back into the deep, dreamless peace of the past. End of script. Sweet dreams.